Hello, friends. The story I brought to you today is called It Follows. At the beginning of the story, we see a girl whose name was Annie. We see her running out of her home, and it looked like she saw something and was so scared of it. After that, she started running towards her home. Watching her like this, Annie's father asked her what happened and if everything was okay. But Annie didn't answer to her father, and after that, we saw her run out of her home and left in her car. After that, we saw Annie went to the beach in her car, and she called her parents. She told them that she loved them a lot. After the scene changes, we saw that Annie is dead, and maybe she was killed by the thing that she was scared of and running away from. In the next scene, we saw two girls named Jay and Kelly, and they were sisters. Jay was taking a shower in the pool, and Kelly was asking her about the new guy who was Jay's boyfriend. And then we also got to know that they were going to watch a movie that night. In the next scene, we see Jay with her two friends, whose names were Paul and Yara, and they were Jay's best friend. After that, we can see Jay was getting ready for the date, and she went to the theater with this new boyfriend, Hugh. There, Hugh saw a girl and asked Jay if she could also see the girl. But Jay said no, there was no one. Listening to Jay, Hugh got so scared as if he was in big trouble. So Hugh left the theater with Jay. In the next scene, we saw them in a restaurant, and there was a mysterious guy looking at Hugh and was coming toward him. The next day, Kelly asked Jay how was their first date. Jay answered that it was not that great because Hugh acted so strange. After that, we saw that Jay and Hugh went on a date again, and there Jay was kissing Hugh, and then they get inside their car, and they got into physical relations. And after that moment, we can see that Hugh made her unconscious, and when Jay became conscious again, she discovered she was in a very quiet and creepy place. And then, Hugh found out a mystery about him, and told Jay that something very unnatural was following him. He means an entity is following him who wants to kill Hugh. And all these things are happening with him since he had sex with a girl, and to save his life he had sex with Jay, so that the entity would leave him alone and will follow Jay from now on. Hugh also said that if the entity kills her, then the entity will start to follow Hugh again, and if you want to save your life, then you have to have sex with someone else. So that the entity leaves you alone and starts to follow that guy. And then Hugh said that the entity is here, and she was fully naked. Then Jay could also see the entity. This means the curse of Hugh got transferred to Jay. Then Hugh also said this entity could be slow, but she's not a fool, so take care of yourself. And then we can see that Hugh took Jay in his car and left her in front of her home. In the next scene, we see that Jay's friend and Kelly had called the police. Then we got to know that before dating her, no one ever saw Hugh in this town. That's why the police couldn't help Jay. After that incident, Jay was so gloomy all day. And then one day she was in her washroom, and suddenly a ball hit the window. Then she looked outside. But except for the ball, Jay couldn't see anyone else there. But we saw a guy wearing red in her roof beside the window and was spying through the window. After some day, we see Jay was in her college, and she saw a strange old lady was coming toward her, and Jay remembered that this was the entity that Hugh talked about earlier. She came with the look of an old lady. Then Jay left her class and went to her friend Paul and Kelly, and told them that an entity is following her, who wants to kill her. And all of this started since she had sex with Hugh. But they didn't believe a word Jay told them, and they said these are Jay's hallucinations. But to calm Jay down, Paul said, if you want, I can stay with you in your house. Then at night, Jay couldn't sleep because she was too scared about the fact. So she came down and saw that Paul was watching TV. And there we got to know that Paul was a very old friend of Jay, and Jay had her first kiss with Paul. Then they got so scared hearing a noise. Paul went to check in on what was there, and came back saying no one was there except for someone broke the glass. After that, Jay went to the kitchen and saw the entity was there. She was pissing in her clothes, and she was so ugly. She was coming toward Jay to kill her. Jay got so scared after seeing the entity and ran away from there. Then she locked herself in her room. Then Paul and Yara came into her room after hearing her scream. And Jay told them, there's someone in this house who wants to kill her. I saw her with my own eyes. But Paul and Yara said there's no one here, and you're scared for literally nothing. Then Jay saw a very tall guy, who was actually the entity, who was coming to kill her in many shapes and looks. But then Jay ran out of the house and went to a park. And this time, Jay realized that everything Hugh said to him was true, and if she wants to save herself from the entity, then she will have to run away from the entity. After some time, Jay's friend also came to the park, and then we saw their neighbor Greg in the park, and asked them about their problem. And then Jay told them everything that was happening with her and why it was happening with her. And Jay also said that she has to find a guy named Hugh, because of whom all of these things were happening to her. After that, all of them got in Greg's car and started to search for Hugh. They went to Hugh's house, but the whole house was empty, because everything Hugh told Jay about him, like his identity, his address, all of that was fake. All he wanted was to transfer his curse to someone else, which he did to Jay, and that was his only intention. But they searched the whole house, and they found a photo, and they found about his school from that photo. And all of them went to that school and asked about Hugh. Then they got to know that Hugh's real name was Jeff. In the next scene, we saw that they were in Jeff's house, and then Jay told about all of her problems to Jeff, and Jeff told them that the entity would never leave you alone until you have sex with someone else. And only for this reason I acted like I loved you and had sex with you, so that my curse gets transferred to you. And the entity was so powerful that she could turn herself into anyone whenever she wanted, and Jeff also said that if you die, the entity would come back to me again, and this means if Jay dies, then the curse would return to Jeff again. And that entity would start following him again. After that, to save Jay from that entity, Jay's friend took her to a beach far, far away. There, Greg was teaching Jay to shoot. But after some time, the entity reached there. Since only Jay could see that entity, no one else could see that entity there. After that, the entity grabs on Jay's hair, and seeing that, Jay's friend tries to save Jay, but then the entity attacked him too. And then somehow they managed to get into the boathouse, and Jay tried to kill the entity by shooting it, but she couldn't kill the entity because it was impossible to kill that entity. Then Jay got scared of it and closed the door. Suddenly the door broke open, and Greg came there, and there was no one there. But then Jay saw an ugly entity, and she got scared of it and ran away in Greg's car alone. But her friends tried to stop her, and the entity had also started to follow her. But Jay didn't listen to them and ran away from there, and she got into an accident while driving, and she fell unconscious. In the next scene, we can see that Jay is in a hospital where Greg was thinking about having sex with Jay, because he wanted to make her feel better and wanted to get her off from the hallucination, and wanted to make her understand that there was no entity behind her. And then Greg had sex with Jay. After that, Jay didn't see the entity, and thought that the entity had left her alone. But all the time, she was scared of thinking about the entity. In the next scene, we saw that Jay's friend was asking Greg if he could see the entity. Then Greg replied that he hasn't seen any entity for now. After that, Jay saw Greg on the road at night, but she realized that it was not Greg. It was the entity who was going to kill Greg. The entity was trying to open Greg's door, but couldn't open it, so it broke the window and went inside of the house. Watching this, Jay got very scared and went to Greg's house and was trying to open the door, but she couldn't open it. Then Jay went inside the house using the broken window and saw the entity has formed into his mother and was standing in front of Greg's house and was calling him. Jay was screaming and telling Greg not to open the door and said, "If you open the door, you will die." But Greg couldn't understand anything and opens the door. Right then, the entity kills him, and the entity started to follow Jay again. In the next scene, we can see Jay in a beach where there was a boat in the distance, and she was thinking about having sex with them to get rid of her curse and transfer it to them. But she doesn't do it. After that, we saw Jay in a room with Paul in front of her. Since Paul liked Jay so much, he wanted to help her, and he said that they could kill the entity. And after that, they went to their school swimming pool, where they put electrical stuff around the pool so that if the entity follows Jay again, they could kill her with electric shock. After that, Jay gets into the pool and was waiting for the entity. After some time, the entity came there, but it was not getting into the water. But it was throwing the electrical stuff, targeting Jay. And seeing that, Jay's friends tried to help her and throw a piece of cloth where Jay pointed. And after that, all of them could see the entity, and Paul killed the entity by shooting it in the head. As a result, the entity falls into the water and grabs Jay's leg. Then Paul shoots it again in the head, and it leaves Jay's leg. And then all of them took out Jay from the pool. After some time, when Jay looked at the pool, the entity was not there, and the pool water was red with blood. Since their plan was not successful, Paul asked Jay that he will have sex with Jay, and then the entity will start following him. And Paul wants to do all of this because he loves Jay, and he wants to save her from death. And then they had sex, and as a result, the curse got transferred to Paul from Jay. After that, we can see that Paul was also scared, but he didn't see any entity. After that, we saw Jay asking Paul if he could see any entity. Paul replied, "No, I didn't see any entity for now." But right then, we saw that the entity was right behind them. And the movie ends here. So friends, the moral of the story is death can be slow, but we can never neglect it. Someday it will come to our door at any cost, and we have to accept it, even if we don't want to. How do you feel about today's explanation? Don't forget to let me know in the comments down below. To get more explanation of new movies like this, do subscribe to the channel. At the end, I will say stay safe, stay well. Thanks.